probate fraud continues to be extremely prevalent in the fraud cases that we see presented to us as a licensed private investigative agency. Many times, the people that are around an estate when somebody dies just can't help themselves. They see all this money that's going to be distributed. Maybe it's bank accounts or vehicles or real estate or corporate assets, and they don't know if they're going to get anything in a will, or even if they do, they want more. And they just can't help it. They're going to fake documents. They're going to steal money. They're going to write checks. They're going to forward deposits to somebody else. And we see it on a regular basis, dozens of times per day. And just, quick headline here, even in the legal community, people aren't exempt from it. This was a mayor of a small town in Texas that made up a fake will 10 years after somebody died to try to take money. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you are. People are very, very tempted by an estate to steal money. So what do you do about it? If you are in a family where somebody has recently deceased, or maybe they're in conservatorship, maybe they're in a rest home, maybe they are older, and people know that at some point they're probably going to die, or maybe they're not going to live forever. What you want to do is start getting a very detailed itinerary of the assets early on. You don't want to wait till the person dies to find out the assets, because sometimes they have been diluted or transfers before they even die. The second thing is, if a person dies without a will or intestate, you want to start looking at public records very quickly, because a lot of times what will happen is a person close to the deceased, a relative, a friend, a colleague, an accountant, will try to appoint themselves as the executor so that they can make the decision of who gets the money, how to distribute it, and make fees off it. So they'll try to step in front of the state from becoming the executor, and they'll try to do it. So you want to make sure that you get a handle on that. Regardless if there's a will or not a will, whoever is the executor, you should insist that that executor does two things. First of all, that they get bonded, that they get a surety bond on their performance. So that way, whatever they do, if they do something wrong, there's a surety bond that will fix the problem. Also, the bonding company will do some research and background on that person to make sure that they're qualified to become an executor. The second thing is, you want to insist upon regular reporting. You want that executor to give constant updates, probably monthly, on what they found for assets, what they've distributed, who they've given it to, how they feel like it should be distributed, and how what they're doing matches that. In addition, it's usually better to have somebody who is a little bit of an arm's length transaction away from the deceased. You don't want always a close relative, because they may favor one relative over another, or some people over another. You want somebody who has a little bit of distance but is trustworthy. A lot of times, a trusted friend, a coworker, maybe a boss, maybe somebody who has some financial sophistication can do this. Somebody who knows the deceased, who trusts them, but is not a close relative, because a lot of bad things can happen. And if something goes wrong, there might be animosity within the family. If you suspect that there is some fraud, you want to take action early. You want to run asset checks. You want to do verification of transfers. You want to make sure there's no fraudulent conveyance. You want to make sure that all of the assets are accounted for. Many times the executor, either on purpose or by accident, won't put all the assets into the estate, and some things never get distributed, or they somehow end up in the wrong hands. It's very common. Almost all the time when we have a client come to us that says, look, I think assets in this estate aren't being handled right, when we look into it, 99% of the time, they are correct. If you have an instinct about this, you're probably going to be right. It's very rare that somebody thinks something's going wrong and they're just, overly cautious. You can get this checked out pretty easily. Assets are one of the most common types of investigations to do. If you are an executor yourself, it's highly recommended that you engage with a professional so that you can never be called in question later that you did something wrong, that you had all the assets accounted for, you gave them away the right way. Maybe you get legal advice, maybe you get an investigation. A lot of different things can be done to make your job easier. If you have other questions, you need some consultation, you can click the link below. You can consult with a licensed private investigator to get some insight into how these things work. But most importantly, if a person is deceased, You want to make sure that their assets are distributed the way they want to, not the way other people do. Remember, that word will, when somebody dies, they have a will, isn't just the name of a piece of paper. Will is a verb that means, what is your intentions? What do you will to have happen? And you want to make sure that that person's will and their intentions are honored. If you don't honor them and let people just hand out the money however they want, you're disrespecting that deceased person. Now look, if you want somebody to have more money than they would have normally received or more assets, you can give that to them later, but make sure they go to the right people first and then are transferred accordingly after the fact if somebody wants to be more generous.